Everyone in the city had heard about the Millionaire's twins. Their father, Mr. Jonathan Reed, was one of the richest men in the country. He owned hotels, factories, and even a private island, but no amount of money could buy him peace inside. His own home, the twins, Ethan and Emily, were only 12 years old. But they had already become a nightmare for every teacher who tried to educate them. They were clever, yes, but they used their cleverness to cause chaos. They locked teachers out of classrooms, hid important papers, and sometimes even convinced other students to join their pranks. It didn't matter if the teacher was young or old. No one lasted more than a week. The problem had become so bad that schools refused to take them. Private tutors came and left in a single day. The city's education board called them impossible to handle. Some teachers even joked, "You'd need a miracle worker to teach those too." Mr. Reed was running out of options. He had tried expensive tutors from other countries. He had tried strict military-style teachers. He had even tried rewarding the twins with money and gifts for behaving, but nothing worked. Then one afternoon, as Mr. Reed sat in his massive office, reading yet another resignation letter from a tutor, his assistant entered. "Sir," she said, "there is someone here to see you." "A teacher," Mr. Reed sighed. "Another one. Tell him it's useless. He'll quit before the week ends." But the assistant hesitated. "Sir, I think you should meet him. He's different." The man who walked in was not what Mr. Reed expected. He was tall, calm, and carried no briefcase or fancy teaching tools. His name was Mr. Harris, a black teacher with kind eyes and a quiet confidence. "I heard you're looking for someone to teach your children," he said simply. Mr. Reed leaned back in his chair. "I am. But I'll warn you, no one can handle them." Mr. Harris only smiled. "I believe every child can be taught, if you know how to reach them." Mr. Reed raised an eyebrow. "They've made teachers cry. They've destroyed classrooms. I've handled worse." Mr. Harris interrupted gently. "All I need is a chance." The millionaire gave a small laugh. "Fine, I'll hire you. Let's see how long you last." "My bet is 3 days." Mr. Harris didn't take the bait. "We'll see," he replied, the next morning. The grand study room in the Reed mansion was prepared. The twins were already waiting, not because they wanted to learn, but because they were excited to see how quickly this new teacher would fail. They whispered to each other, planning tricks before he even arrived. When Mr. Harris walked in, he didn't react to their smirks or whispered laughter. He set down a small box of chalk and a notebook. Nothing else, no tablets, no projectors, no gadgets. "Good morning," he said in a calm voice. "I'm Mr. Harris. You can call me sir." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "How long do you think you'll last?" Emily giggled. "Yeah, maybe 2 days." Mr. Harris smiled. "That depends on how quickly you get bored, instead of starting with a lecture." Mr. Harris walked to the board and began drawing. The twins frowned. It wasn't a math problem or a spelling list. It was a strange puzzle. It had numbers, symbols, and shapes all mixed together. "What is that supposed to be?" Ethan asked. "A challenge." Mr. Harris replied. "Solve it, and you win." "Win what?" Emily asked suspiciously. "You'll find out," he said. The twins loved games and hated losing. They spent the next 20 minutes trying to solve the puzzle, they argued, scribbled notes, and even searched the room for clues. But nothing worked. Finally, Ethan threw his pencil down. "This is stupid." Mr. Harris stepped forward and, in less than 10 seconds, solved the puzzle right in front of them. Their eyes widened. "How?" Emily began. "Every problem has a solution," Mr. Harris said. "The question is, are you willing to work for it?" The twins didn't realize it yet, but this man was different. He wasn't afraid of them. He wasn't trying to impress them. He was challenging them in a way no one else ever had. From that moment, the game had begun. The Millionaire's twins. We're about to meet the first teacher who wouldn't run away. And Mr. Harris was about to discover the truth behind their behavior. A truth that could change everything. The next morning, the twins were ready. Not ready to learn, but ready for war. They had spent the night whispering ideas for how to drive Mr. Harris out before the week was over. Other teachers had shouted. Gotten angry and left in frustration, the twins planned to make this one do the same. When Mr. Harris entered the mansion classroom, the smell of orange juice hit him instantly. It wasn't in glasses, it was on his desk, dripping down. Onto the carpet, Emily sat there with a fake, innocent smile. Oops, I guess my hand slipped. Ethan was grinning like it was the funniest thing in the world. Mr. Harris didn't shout. He didn't even frown. He calmly picked up a cloth from his bag and began wiping the desk. You'll have to try harder than that, he said. The twins glanced at each other. A little surprised, then they moved to plan 2, as Mr. Harris turned to write on the board. Ethan slid a hand into the box of chalk and replaced the white pieces with fake ones they had made out of soap. When Mr. Harris picked one up and began to write, the chalk squeaked strangely and crumbled. Leaving no marks on the board, Emily burst out laughing. Looks like you're not much of a teacher without chalk, but Mr. Harris only smiled. He reached into his bag and pulled out a single piece of real chalk. I always carry one in case of emergencies, he said, starting to write again. The twins' laughter faded. Their tricks weren't working. Half an hour into the lesson, Ethan suddenly stood up. This is boring, he said. We don't need to be here. He walked toward the door and tried to pull it open, but it was locked. They had locked it earlier to trap Mr. Harris in, thinking he would panic. Instead, Mr. Harris turned to them and said, Good. Now you can't escape my next challenge. From his bag, he pulled out a wooden box and set it on the table. The twins stared. What's inside? Emily asked. A game, Mr. Harris replied. If you beat me, you get the afternoon off. If you lose, you write me an essay about what you learned today. What's the game? Ethan asked, curious despite himself. Chess, Mr. Harris said simply. The twins groaned. They didn't like chess, but they hated losing even more. They sat down, confident they could work together and beat him. The game began at first. The twins were cocky, whispering moves to each other, laughing when they captured one of his pieces. But Mr. Harris stayed calm, moving with quiet confidence. Within 20 minutes, the twins realized they were losing badly. Every move they made, he seemed to have already predicted. Ethan tried a risky play, but Mr. Harris countered it perfectly. Checkmate, Mr. Harris said softly. Leaning back, the twins stared at the board in shock. No way, Ethan muttered. You cheated. Emily accused. Mr. Harris shook his head. No cheating. Just thinking ahead, the twins were silent. They weren't used to losing, especially not to a teacher. Mr. Harris began putting the chess pieces away. I'll expect those essays tomorrow morning. Something inside the twins shifted. For the first time, they weren't angry. They were curious. After class, they didn't run off to play video games or pull pranks on the staff. Instead, they sat in the library whispering about how this new teacher was different. He doesn't get mad, Ethan said, and he doesn't act scared, Emily added. Maybe. He's actually smart, Ethan admitted reluctantly. Meanwhile, Mr. Reed had been watching from the doorway during part of the lesson. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The twins actually sitting, paying attention, and even losing a game without throwing a tantrum. It was the first time in years he had seen them challenged like this. That night, as the mansion grew quiet, Ethan sat at his desk, tapping his pen against the paper. He wasn't writing his essay because he had to. He was writing it because he wanted to prove to Mr. Harris that he could. Emily peeked into his room, holding her own half-finished essay. Do you think he's going to last longer than a week? She asked. Ethan smirked. We'll see. Tomorrow, we'll test him again. But deep down, neither of them was as confident as before. Something about Mr. Harris was starting to make them wonder if this wasn't a game they could win. The next day, the mansion classroom was strangely quiet. The twins were sitting at their desks before Mr. Harris even arrived. It wasn't because they had suddenly become model students. It was because they had a brand new plan, one that they were sure would finally make him quit. When Mr. Harris walked in, he saw two smiling faces. "Good morning, sir," Emily said sweetly. Ethan added, "We've prepared something special for you today." Mr. Harris didn't flinch. "I'm looking forward to it." As soon as he turned to the board, Emily knocked over a glass of water, but this time it spilled right onto his notebook. The pages soaked instantly, the ink running like rivers. It was obvious the spill was no accident. Mr. Harris lifted the notebook, shook off the water, and placed it aside. "Good thing I keep the important things here," he said, tapping his forehead. The twins exchanged quick glances. Another failed attempt, they moved on to plan 2, while Mr. Harris started the lesson. Ethan pretended to listen. But under the desk, he was tying the legs of Mr. Harris's chair together with rope. At the right moment, Ethan gave a small tug, and the chair tipped slightly. Most teachers would have stumbled and gotten angry, but Mr. Harris simply stood up, moved the chair aside, and continued speaking like nothing had happened. "Today," he said, "we're not doing normal lessons." The twins' interest sharpened. "We're going outside," he continued. "Outside?" Emily asked. "You mean like playtime?" "Not exactly," Mr. Harris replied with a mysterious smile. They followed him out to the back garden, where a large chessboard pattern had been painted on the grass. But instead of chess pieces, there were cones, ropes, and small numbered cards. "This," Mr. Harris explained, "is a puzzle race, and the only way to win is to work together." The twins frowned. "We don't work together," Ethan said flatly. "Then you'll lose." Mr. Harris replied, "Your choice, at first." They tried to beat the puzzle on their own, running to different parts of the board, shouting over each other, but every time they solved one section, they discovered it didn't fit with the other. After 15 frustrating minutes, they stopped. Breathing hard, Mr. Harris folded his arms. "Are you ready to try my way?" Reluctantly, they agreed. This time, they talked through each step. Emily spotted a clue hidden under a cone. Ethan figured out the code to unlock a small box. When they finally placed the last numbered card in position, the pattern revealed a message. "You're smarter together." The twins stared at the board, then at each other. It was the first time in years they had completed something side by side without fighting. Later that day, Mr. Harris told them a story. It wasn't from a textbook. It was from his own life. He spoke about growing up in a small, noisy neighborhood, how he and his older brother used to fight all the time until one day they had to work together to protect their little sister from bullies. "How did you win?" Ethan asked, leaning forward. "By trusting each other," Mr. Harris said. "Sometimes the only way to win is to stop seeing each other as enemies." The twins didn't say anything, but something in their eyes changed. For the first time, they weren't looking at him like he was a target. They were listening. That evening, when Mr. Reed came home, he found the twins in the library. They weren't watching TV or playing games. They were working on a puzzle book together. "Since when do you two do homework without me forcing you?" he asked in shock. Emily shrugged. "It's not homework, it's practice," Ethan added, "for puzzles and stuff." Mr. Reed couldn't hide his surprise. But the twins' change wasn't complete. The old habits still lingered. The next day, Emily tested Mr. Harris again, hiding his bag before class. When he couldn't find it, he simply took a piece of chalk and began writing the day's lesson from memory. "You can take my bag, but you can't take my mind," he said with a grin. Emily felt a small, strange twist in her stomach. It wasn't guilt, but something close. That night, in their shared upstairs balcony, Ethan said quietly, "You know, It's not like the others. Emily nodded. Yeah, he doesn't get mad. He doesn't quit. Do you think he actually cares about us? Ethan asked. Emily didn't answer, but deep down she was starting to wonder the same thing. The walls they had built for years, walls made of mischief, defiance, and stubborn pride, were beginning to crack. And Mr. Harris, without raising his voice or forcing them, was stepping right through. Mr. Harris had been teaching the twins for almost 2 weeks now. Every day brought a new challenge, but he was slowly noticing something strange. Yes, the twins were clever, stubborn, and full of energy. But sometimes, when they thought no one was watching, their faces looked sad. It started with small things. One afternoon, during a lesson, Emily stared out the window for almost 10 minutes. When Mr. Harris asked what she was looking at, she said quietly, "Nothing." But he noticed she was watching a mother in the street holding her little girl's hand. Emily's eyes followed them until they disappeared around the corner. The next clue came from Ethan. He was usually quick with his words, ready to make jokes or tease. But one day, when Mr. Harris praised him for solving a difficult problem, Ethan muttered, "It's not like anyone cares." Mr. Harris asked what he meant. But Ethan just shrugged and looked away. That night, Mr. Harris sat in the study with a cup of tea, thinking there was something behind all the mischief, something heavier. The next morning, instead of starting with books, he decided to take them on a short walk. They walked through the gardens, past the fountain, until they reached the old greenhouse at the edge of the property. It was dusty and half forgotten. But inside, there was a single table with a faded family photograph. It showed a younger Mr. Reed, a smiling woman, and 2 very small children, the twins. Emily froze when she saw it. Ethan looked down at his shoes. "That's your mother, isn't it?" Mr. Harris asked gently. Neither of them answered, but their silence was enough. Mr. Harris waited, giving them space. Finally, Emily whispered, "She died when we were 6. Her voice cracked. Ethan's hands were clenched into fists. Dad was always busy even before that, but after she was gone, he just worked all the time. Mr. Harris understood now. The wild behavior, the pranks, the constant testing of boundaries. It wasn't just because they were spoiled, it was because they were lonely. No one had been there to listen to them, to guide them, or even to notice when they were hurting. "I'm sorry," Mr. Harris said softly. Emily brushed her eyes quickly. "We don't need anyone's pity." "It's not pity," he replied. "It's understanding." They stood there for a while in silence. The air was thick with memories the twins didn't like to talk about. Finally, Mr. Harris said, "You know, when I was a boy, my father left. My mother worked 2 jobs, so I spent a lot of time feeling like no one had time for me." Emily glanced at him. "So what did you do?" "I acted out," he admitted. "I thought if I made enough noise, someone would finally notice me. But what I really needed wasn't punishment or rewards. It was someone who cared enough to stay." Ethan's voice was low. "No one stays." Mr. Harris looked him in the eye. "I'm still here, aren't I?" For the rest of that day, the twins were quieter, not bored, just thoughtful. When Mr. Harris gave them their usual lessons, they worked without tricks or arguments. It was as if talking about their mother had released something inside them. Not all of it, but enough to make a small crack in the wall they had built around their hearts. That evening, Mr. Reed returned home early. He walked past the library and stopped. The twins were sitting at the table with Mr. Harris. Working together on a history project, there was laughter, there were questions, and there was a warmth he hadn't seen in years. For a moment, he felt like an outsider in his own home. Later, Mr. Reed approached Mr. Harris in the hallway. "I don't know what you said to them," he admitted, "but they're different," Mr. Harris simply replied. "They've always been good kids. They just needed someone to hear them." Mr. Reed looked down, guilt flickering in his eyes. He knew those words were meant for him too. That night, in their rooms, the twins talked quietly before bed. Ethan said, "I think he actually means it when he says he's not leaving." Emily nodded. "Yeah. And I believe him." It wasn't a promise they would trust fully yet, but for the first time, they wanted to try. The truth was out now. Mr. Harris finally understood the pain behind the mischief. The twins had finally met an adult who wasn't going to give up on them. The days after their talk in the greenhouse felt different. The tension that had always hung in the air between Mr. Harris and the twins was starting to fade. The sharp, challenging looks were replaced by small smiles. The constant pranks had slowed, almost disappearing. But Mr. Harris knew that real change didn't happen in a single moment. It had to be built step by step. So he began introducing something new, lessons that didn't feel like lessons. Instead of only teaching from books, he gave the twins projects. One morning, he told them, "Today, you're not sitting here. We're going to the market." Ethan frowned. "Why?" "We don't need groceries," Mr. Harris smiled. "Not for food, for learning, at the busy market." He handed them a small list and a set amount of money. "Your job is to buy everything on this list and still have change left over." He explained. Emily raised an eyebrow. "So, math in real life?" "Exactly," Mr. Harris said. "And maybe a little bit of teamwork." At first, they argued about what to buy. Ethan wanted to take shortcuts. Emily wanted to pick only the best items, but slowly, they began to balance each other's choices. When they returned to the mansion with the bags and coins left over, Mr. Harris nodded. "Good work. You just passed today's lesson." The twins didn't say it, but they felt proud. It was the first time they'd done something together without feeling like it was forced. From that day, Mr. Harris made every lesson an adventure. Science became experiments in the garden. History became acting out old battles with wooden swords. Math turned into planning the budget for a pretend business. The twins started waking up early, actually looking forward to the day. Even the household staff noticed they're polite now. The cook whispered to the maid, still loud. The maid replied, "But," in a good way. Mr. Reed saw the changes too. One evening, came home to find the twins helping the gardener plant flowers. They were laughing and muddy. It was a sight he hadn't seen in years, his children actually happy without demanding expensive things. Then came the big surprise. Mr. Harris signed the twins up for a local school competition, a mix of puzzles, problem solving, and teamwork challenges. When he told them, Ethan looked nervous. "What if we lose?" "Then you learn," Mr. Harris said simply. "But I think you're going to win." The day of the competition, the twins walked into the crowded hall. Other kids whispered everyone knew the Millionaire's twins as troublemakers. Some laughed, expecting them to fail. But once the challenges began, the twins focused like never before. Emily solved a puzzle in record time. Ethan figured out a complicated building challenge, and together, they won the final round, a memory and logic test, by working faster than any other team. When the host announced them as the winners, the twins looked at each other in shock. They weren't used to people clapping for them. Mr. Harris stood at the side of the stage, clapping the loudest back at the mansion that evening. Mr. Reed threw a small celebration. The twins didn't talk about the prize or the certificate. They only talked about how much fun they had working together. At the end of the night, Ethan raised his glass of juice and said, "Thanks, Mr. Harris. You're the first teacher who believed in us," Emily added softly. "Yeah. You didn't give up." Mr. Reed stood there, hearing those words, and something heavy stirred inside him. He realized he had been so focused on running his businesses that he hadn't noticed his own children growing up. He hadn't been there for them the way Mr. Harris had, and for the first time in years, he felt both guilt and gratitude. Later that night, Mr. Reed found Mr. Harris in the study. "You've done something I couldn't do," he admitted. "You've reached them." Mr. Harris smiled. They were always worth reaching. From that point on, Mr. Reed started making small changes too. He adjusted his work schedule to spend at least 2 evenings a week at home. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The twins didn't fully realize it yet. But their lives were changing, and this was only the beginning. The real test was still coming, one that would decide if everything they had built with Mr. Harris would last. It had been almost a month since Mr. Harris first walked into the mansion classroom. The twins had changed so much that even the staff spoke about it in amazement. No shouting matches, no cruel pranks, just 2 children who were finally learning, laughing and living without constant trouble. But as life often does, change brought a challenge. One evening, Mr. Reed called Mr. Harris into his office. "I've received an important offer," Mr. Reed said slowly. "It's a chance to expand my business overseas. I'd have to move." For at least a year, Mr. Harris nodded politely. "I understand." Mr. Reed hesitated before adding, "If I go, I'll need to find the twins a different tutor, someone who can travel with them. It might be easier for you to stay here for." The first time in weeks, Mr. Harris felt his heart sink. He knew how far the twins had come, and how fragile that progress still was. If they were handed off to another tutor, especially one who didn't understand them, they could fall right back into old habits. The next morning, the news reached the twins. Ethan dropped his pencil. "You mean you're leaving?" Emily's voice was sharp. "You said you wouldn't quit." "I'm not quitting," Mr. Harris said gently. "But your father thinks it might be better for you to have someone who can move with you." The twins exchanged a look. It wasn't just disappointment, it was fear. They had lost their mother, and they had grown up with a father who was mostly absent. Now, the one person who had truly listened to them might be taken away too. That night, the mansion felt colder than usual. Ethan sat on his bed, staring at the chessboard Mr. Harris had given him. Emily sat cross-legged on the floor, sketching but not really drawing anything. Finally, Ethan said, "We can't let him leave." Emily nodded. "Then we'll make Dad listen the next day, instead of starting their lessons." The twins handed Mr. Harris an envelope. "What's this?" he asked. "It's for Dad." Emily said. Inside was a letter, written in both their handwriting. It wasn't neat, but it was honest. "Dear Dad, we know you're busy. We know your work is important, but we need you to understand something. Mr. Harris isn't just our teacher. He's the first person who made us feel like we can be better. If you take him away, we'll go back to how we were before, and we don't want that. Please, let him stay. Even if you go far away, we'll work harder than ever. We promise." When Mr. Reed read the letter later that evening, he had to put it down halfway through. The words hit him harder than any business report or contract ever could. For years, he had thought that giving his children the best money could buy was enough. But this wasn't about money. It was about time, trust, and love. The next morning, he called the twins and Mr. Harris into his office. "I've made my decision," he began. The twins held their breath. "I'm taking the overseas deal," he continued, "but Mr. Harris will stay with you as your full-time tutor. I'll arrange everything so you can keep learning from him, no matter where I am." Ethan grinned. "So, you're not leaving us?" Mr. Harris smiled warmly. "Not a chance." Emily let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. "Good, because we weren't going to let you go anyway." The relief in the room was almost visible, but Mr. Reed wasn't finished. "I'll also be home more often than before," he added. "No matter how far I travel, I'll make time. For you?" That's a promise. It wasn't just the twins who were changing, their father was too. That week, the lessons took on a new energy. The twins worked harder, not because they were forced, but because they wanted to show Mr. Harris they were worth the fight. They even started setting their own goals. Ethan decided he wanted to learn coding. Emily wanted to enter an art contest one evening. As the sun set over the gardens, Mr. Harris stood watching them race each other across the lawn. When they reached him, breathless and laughing, Emily said, "You know, you're part of the family now." Ethan nodded. "Yeah, whether you like it or not." Mr. Harris chuckled. "I think I can live with that." The ultimate test had come and gone. And for the first time, the twins knew Mr. Harris wasn't just a chapter in their lives. He was going to be part of the whole story. Spring came to the Reed mansion. The gardens were bright with flowers, and the air smelled fresh. Inside, life had changed in ways no one could have imagined just 2 months earlier. The twins woke up early without anyone yelling at them. They came to breakfast with books under their arms instead of excuses. And the sound of laughter in the halls was no longer from mocking someone. It was real joy. Mr. Harris had settled into the mansion as if he had always belonged there. The staff treated him with respect. The twins treated him with something much deeper, trust. And even Mr. Reed, a man who had once lived only for his work, now made sure he was home more often. One Saturday morning, Mr. Harris gathered the twins in the study. "I have a challenge for you," he said with a smile. Ethan grinned. "Another puzzle?" "Sort of," Mr. Harris replied, "but this one isn't for school. It's for life." He placed a large blank scrapbook on the table. "From today, I want the 3 of us to fill this together," he explained. "Drawings, letters, photos. Anything that tells the story of what we've done and what we'll do." Emily's eyes lit up. "So, like our own family history." "Exactly," Mr. Harris said. The twins threw themselves into the project. They pasted in the photo of them holding their competition trophy. They wrote short notes about the day at the market. Emily drew a funny picture of Mr. Harris trying to plant flowers and getting dirt all over his shirt. Ethan added a chessboard diagram of the first game they lost to him, with "We'll win one day" scribbled underneath. Mr. Reed walked past the study door and stopped. He saw them sitting close together, heads bent over the book, and felt something warm in his chest. It wasn't pride in their grades or manners. It was pride in the people they were becoming. That evening, Mr. Reed joined them at the table. "Mind if I add something?" he asked. The twins exchanged a surprised look and slid the scrapbook toward him. He wrote slowly, his handwriting neat and deliberate. "To Ethan and Emily, I have not always been here the way I should have, but I am proud of who you are becoming. And I am grateful to Mr. Harris for showing me how to be a better father. From now on, we build this story together." Emily smiled softly. Ethan cleared his throat, pretending he wasn't touched. But both of them knew that something had shifted, not just between them and Mr. Harris, but between them and their father. Over the following weeks, the house was busier than ever. Mr. Harris still taught lessons, but now they included moments with Mr. Reed. Sometimes they would all cook together in the kitchen. Sometimes they would play team games in the garden. And every night, the scrapbook grew thicker. One rainy afternoon, as thunder rolled outside, Emily asked, "Sir, why did you stay? You could have taken an easier job." Mr. Harris looked at them both. "Because I saw something worth fighting for." Ethan frowned slightly. "Us." "Of course," Mr. Harris said. "Under all the trouble and noise, I saw 2 kids who just needed someone to believe in them. And I wasn't going to walk away from that." The twins didn't know what to say, so they didn't. Instead, Emily slid the scrapbook toward him. "Then you have to promise to stay until it's full." Mr. Harris grinned. "Deal." By the scree time, summer began. The changes in the twins were impossible to ignore. They were polite to the staff, kind to other children, and more confident in themselves. Even the neighbors, who once whispered about their bad behavior, now spoke of their intelligence and charm. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky gold, the 3 of them sat on the back steps. Ethan leaned against Mr. Harris on one side, Emily on the other. Mr. Reed stepped outside and paused. It was the kind of moment that didn't need words, the kind you remembered for the rest of your life. "You know," Mr. Reed said finally, "I used to think being a father was about providing things. But I see now, it's about being there. And I'm not going anywhere again." The twins smiled. Mr. Harris simply nodded. Knowing his work here had changed more than just 2 children. It had changed a family. That night, as the lights in the mansion went out one by one, a quiet peace settled over the home. The wild twins of the Millionaire were no longer the challenge nobody wanted. They were part of a team, part of a family, and at the center of it all was the teacher, who refused to give up.